Welcome to the final part of a 4-part tutorial on deploying WebSphere-extreme-scale for IBM Bluemix Container Service, or ICS. This video will demonstrate how a user can deploy and configure a Bluemix application to use the caching infrastructure of IBM WebSphere-extreme-scale containers running in ICS. Any application, including Bluemix apps, can be configured to point to extreme-scale caching containers running in ICS to use them for their caching needs. Check the Extreme-Scale GitHub for examples on how to deploy your Simple Cache, HTTP Session Cache, or Dynacache applications on Bluemix. A link can be found in the video description below. As you can see from the Bluemix console, there are two containers currently running Extreme-Scale as a two-member cache group, WXS1 and WXS2. You will have the same setup if you followed along with the previous videos in the tutorial. Now, we will deploy a Bluemix application war file called cachejava-testa.war. Under the same directory, there is a JSON file called ups.json. This JSON file will be used to create a user-provided service that will map to the caching containers we deployed in the previous videos. Here is the ups.json content. It defines the extreme-scale catalog endpoints which match the public IPs of the deployed extreme-scale containers. It also contains grid information for the grid we created in the previous video. It has the grid name and the username and password of the grid owner. To deploy and configure the Bluemix application, we will use the Cloud Foundry CLI. For more information on using the Cloud Foundry CLI, please refer to the video description below. First, run the cf push command to deploy the Bluemix application. The default Liberty build pack includes extreme-scale client libraries out of the box. This means that it is not required for the application war file to include extreme-scale cache client jars. After the application is deployed, run the cf-cups command to create a user-provided service by passing the ups.json file as a parameter. This will create a custom service that will map to the caching containers. Note that when creating the user-provided service, we use XSSimple as the prefix for the service name. This will map to the simple grid in extreme-scale for a simple grid type use case. For a session use case, you can use XSSession as the prefix. And for a Dynacache use case, you can use XSDyna as the prefix. Now run the cf-bind-service command to bind the custom service to the deployed application. Typically, you would restage your application at this point, but there are more modifications we are going to make before restaging. The client application needs to know how to map the extreme-scale container's host aliases, WXS1 and WXS2, to the public IPs that were assigned to those containers, in order for it to communicate with the caching infrastructure. Use the cf-setenv command twice to set both host alias environment variables and map the container aliases WXS1 and WXS2 to their corresponding public IPs assigned by ICS. Finally, the Bluemix application needs to be restaged to apply the new environment variables and the bind service change. Run the cf restage command, and this will instruct Bluemix to restart the application. When the Bluemix console is refreshed, the WXS demo app is displayed under the All Apps list. Going into the app and selecting Runtime and then Environment Variables, you can see the details on the information you provided in ups.json under vcap services, as well as the host alias variables you set from the command line. Click on the link at the top to launch your WXS demo app in your browser. In the sample application, enter a few values to put into the grid. Test out the get operation to see if the correct value is returned from the grid. Then, try deleting one of the keys from the grid and see if the get operation returns null. Afterwards, give it a new value and then check to see if you can retrieve it. Back at the extreme-scale dashboard, you can go to Data Grids and click on Test Grid 1. You can select Monitor on the side to check the usage for the caching operations on the grid. Also, if you go back to the Bluemix dashboard, you can select the WXS1 container. If you go to the Monitoring and Logs section, you can see the usage of the caching operations on the container. Thank you for joining us for a demonstration of how to deploy and configure a Bluemix application to work with extreme-scale containers deployed in the Bluemix ICS environment. This concludes the 4-part tutorial on deploying WebSphere-extreme-scale for IBM Bluemix Container Service. Thank you for following along, and for more information on WebSphere-extreme-scale, please refer to the video description below.